There, Steve Sandhuff here. Hey, I'm gonna do a film. It's actually for Secretary Jack Monaso in Louisiana. This reminds me right here. This is actually how I won a case, a lawsuit on state and federal agents violating my civil rights. You see how that branch snaps off? These lower branches are dead, and how they break. All right. Well, I didn't win the motion to suppress based on dead branches, but I did figure out the whole case. I had Leland cypress trees up against my fence, and the Leland cypress trees had dead branches that intertwined. The branches intertwined like this, where you couldn't get through them without breaking them. See how you hit that and it breaks? It breaks like that. So I had a motion to suppress with all these Leland cypress trees intertwined together, but they didn't. The judge on the motion to suppress just let me go to trial because he thought I had a sea turtle swimming around like a pet. The charges were all out of Gwinnett County. They were state charges. There was federal agents involved. But let's talk about how did we get to these charges, and how did this case start, and how did it come about? So in 1994, I was at the University of Florida, and I was studying turtles on my own, had turtles in captivity, just a big fanatic and fan of studying turtles. I've never sold a turtle. I did purchase some alligator snapper turtles in early 2000, like 2002, 2003, whatever the date of the paperwork says. It's already gone through court. I just can't remember the date. It was in my trial in 2008, and it was called the Louisiana Purchase. So it's funny because we were in Georgia arguing about the Louisiana Purchase in trial. Crazy, crazy. So in '94 in Florida, I turned in a local reptile business for having illegal turtles. And then I met Tim Ballard out of Arkansas. He was a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service special agent. He was in Florida, assigned in Florida, but he was originally from Arkansas. So he ended up prosecuting these people with these illegal reptiles. There was people in 2 different states that got arrested, and also people at Florida got arrested in Gainesville. And then he asked me if I wanted to become a cooperating private individual as a volunteer, and it'd be long term. And turns out I was the only long-term cooperating private individual that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had. I was designated for 20 years. It's paperwork. They didn't have any other long-term cooperating private individuals. They normally had cooperating private individuals that were just involved in, one case here and there. They weren't involved in, long-term, get us information, all that stuff. They ended up asking me to help them on cases in '95. People went to prison. People fled the country. It's on the internet. The operation name's on the internet. And no reason for me to mention those names right now. Then I ended up moving back to Atlanta with my turtles that I had. They would not give me permits in Georgia. They protected the turtles in '92. I left in '91, started at the University of Florida in May '91, and they protected the turtle species that I had. I had, I think, 4 turtle species that got protected by Georgia. I had my alligator snapper turtles, 3 of them from captive raised from Al Redmond, a professional trapper. I bought those in '88. Then I went to Florida with those, and the state of Florida gave me permits to keep those 3. So when I moved back to Georgia, they'd already protected the turtles, and I had these turtles, and they wouldn't give me permits. So I called them, I asked them, and they're like, "No, we're not going to give you permits for keeping protected species." I'm like, "Well, I got these turtles." I didn't tell them, "Oh, I got all these turtles at my house, come by and take them from me." But I'm like, "So is there any way I can get them?" They're like, "No, there's no way you're going to get a permit." I'm like, "Well, what if someone gave me a bunch of them that they had?" "Nope, we're not going to give it to you." Well, I already had them. So what can I do? Can I sell them? Nope, couldn't sell them. Could I let them go? Nope, couldn't let them go. Could I just abandon them and, have cruelty to animals, put them in the trash can? Well, what could I do? So the state of Georgia had no means for obtaining a permit. They wouldn't even entertain the idea. I made several requests. That's how I won my trial, basically. I had proof that I contacted the state of Georgia, like I'm contacting you, about, the letter that I sent to you. And you might get some phone calls from somebody, not that I want to give them any ideas, but some of these agents that I'm going to mention, they might call you. They might even call you anonymously. They might even tell you their names, whatever it is. Or I might have an old friend call you and say, "Oh, he's a son of a gun," Well, sometimes relationships fall out. But There's nobody that could say I ever sold him a turtle, and if there is, demand proof, demand photographs, videos, affidavits under penalty of perjury, whatever. There's no federal agent that could say that they had proof of a crime, none of that stuff. Where are we going from here? We're going to the federal agents, that's right. So I contacted Larry Keck out of Missouri, and I asked Larry Keck to consider starting Operation Snapper. And he did. He got U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service interested. He sent 2 agents to my house, Gary Jagodinsky and Sheila O'Connor, to interview me about how to go about with this process on Operation Snapper. And I'm just looking at some activity going on, wondering if my car is in the way while I'm making this film. The agents got U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out of Washington, D.C. started on that, and Tim Ballard was an agent out of Arkansas that I mentioned. He and Gary Phillips were working a caviar case in Memphis. Tim Ballard turned in Gary Phillips, and Benito Perez, the chief, assistant chief, deputy chief, whatever, flew down from Washington, D.C., interviewed everybody, substantiated that Gary Phillips had been building cases illegally on people through various means, whether he was giving them government equipment to facilitate crimes, encouraging the crimes, entrapping them, framing them, whatever, stealing from them, I'm not sure. He stole from me. He lied in my cases. He framed me, and I've got the proof, and it's been in court, so I could talk about it. The defense to defamation of character is truth, so that's what I'm doing. I'm telling you the truth. You can look it up for yourself in federal court with my last name, Santuff, S-A-N-T-H-U-F-F. So Gary Phillips was turned in by Tim Ballard. They substantiated the claims. They filed a draft stamp on the paperwork. And what else? Sorry, I'm just looking at this truck thinking my car's in the way, but it looks like everything's covered. So I'm sorry for that distraction. I know your time's as valuable as everybody else. The turtle case got assigned to Gary Phillips. So because he was enemies with Tim Ballard, they blackballed Tim Ballard, gave him a desk job in Virginia. Tim Ballard is very upset with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He and I don't talk anymore because of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He doesn't want to think about it or have any more stress over it. He and I communicated for a lot of years. Now Steve Seitz had told Tim Ballard that they had me on illegal wildlife crimes so there was 1 year where Tim Ballard did not talk to me, but he heard through other agents that there was some funny business going on from the agents, and then he started talking to me a year into it, which was still very valuable for me and helpful. An agent out of Alabama named Clem Parnell is a state of Alabama officer. I met Gary Phillips originally in '97 at Clem Parnell's house. Just a month ago, Clem Parnell told me that he was in a meeting in Montgomery of 22 people, state and federal officers and attorneys, and they presented him with 4 pages of questions, and then they presented him with all his testimonial evidence, and they said that they wanted him to testify illegally about that. And sorry for all this noise. So they wanted him to testify illegally about that, and he refused. He stood up in the meeting, and he indicated that he would not. If he was sent to Atlanta for trial, he'd end up telling the truth. I won my civil rights lawsuit against the federal agents, Gary Phillips and Michael Bloxham out of Alabama, a deputy federal agent, but a state employee. And the state of Georgia officer, Steve Seitz, he said that he wasn't with the federal agents when they were stealing turtles from me before they got a search warrant. They'd also been in the house. My wife knew about that. Judge Thomas Thrash changed the jury verdict form to include the house violation where they entered my house without a search warrant by breaking in the back door. My wife testified that she had evidence that had occurred one day in the middle of the day. And the judge saw their look on their faces when she was testifying. I couldn't see the look on their faces. I was watching the judge. But I saw the judge look over at them, and the judge seemed disgusted. And then he changed the verdict form to include the interior of the house. But I won that lawsuit against the federal officer and Michael Bloxham, Gary Phillips and Michael Bloxham. I lost this lawsuit against a state officer because he said he wasn't there. So the state of Georgia assessed me attorney fees in the amount of like $50,000 plus or minus, somewhere between 30 and 40 and 50, depending on how you look at it. But the state of Georgia officer didn't tell the truth. Steve Seitz said he wasn't with the federal agents, but he wrote a time card for that next day. So my lawsuit said on or about the 14th of July 2005, they violated my civil rights by the stealing the turtles, unlawful search and seizure, all that stuff. So on or about the 14th of July. So Steve Seitz says he was on a vacation day on the 14th from a July 4th day. But on the 15th, he says he was with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service gathering evidence for a case. He listed the case number. The case number was the Georgia DNR case, law enforcement case number against me. So he says he was with Fish and Wildlife Service gathering evidence for a search warrant, and that's the day that they were stealing the turtles. They borrowed the Gwinnett County truck. Gwinnett County loaned them a truck outside of Atlanta. They were dressed in city utility uniforms, and they came and stole turtles from me in the yard. They came in the house, and the Leland cypress trees, they said they took the pictures from outside the fence, but the Leland cypress trees with those branches let me know that that was not true. And then I proceeded with the case. So anyway, I won the lawsuit against the federal agents. State officer got attorney fees illegally, fraud upon the court. Those records are in there. I did submit fraud upon the court. That actually went to the U.S. Supreme Court. They didn't grant cert, but I have the documents on that. The judge is no longer a judge. It's Judge Duffy. He's 66. He's now a mediator. He had a lot of complaints on the robing room. They're no longer on the internet that I can find, but he had a lot of complaints, a whole big old page of complaints. And he had announced his retirement from being a federal judge. You know, they're appointed for life. So it's kind of unusual for a federal judge to go from age 66, a federal judge, to being a mediator. So I'm not sure what that's about. I'm going to check the timestamp on this right quick. 11 minutes, so I could shut this down. That's about all I got to say or have to say. I repositioned my old YouTube site. It's called Delticola, Delticola. I've got a lot of corruption videos on there that I uploaded again from being private. You know, I more or less kept my Louisiana residence secret for all these issues with this federal lawsuit with these attorney fees that were obtained illegally on fraud upon the court. And now I'm in Louisiana. It's public now. And now I could reestablish those corruption videos. There's some news stories. There's some description of the law. And then there's these videos on Thorny Turtle Ranch videos. So I hope you enjoyed. Hope it makes more sense to you now. You know, I'll put this on here for stigma. You need to know my side of the story. You need to see where the records are. Just look at the videos and you'll learn a lot about me, and appreciate your time. And you know, I feel like I have to do this as a way to communicate with you on that matter. So thank you very much. Take care.